Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. So you know how this works. You give us the material, we give you the insights. And this time you've thrown us a real gem, a podcast discussion on atomic habits.
Yeah, I love that book.
It seems like everyone's buzzing about it these days. I mean, who doesn't want to unlock the secrets to better habits faster?
No, right? It's like that holy grail of self-improvement.
Totally. So for our listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to dive into atomic habits just yet, can you give us the quick elevator pitch? What's the core idea?
Well, in a nutshell, it's all about the power of small changes consistently applied over time. The author, James Clear, argues that we often overestimate the importance of those big dramatic leaps and underestimate the impact of those tiny 1% improvements that we make each day.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. But I gotta say, 1% seems so minuscule. How did that really translate into any meaningful change?
Well, think about it like this. If you were to improve any skill, let's say your writing speed, by just 1% each day, in a year, you'd be writing almost 4 times faster.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty compelling example. I guess it's true what they say, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of compounding. Small, consistent efforts, repeated over time, can lead to massive transformations.
Yeah, this is making me rethink my whole approach to goals. I always thought it was about those big, grand gestures, but maybe it's more about showing up each day and making that tiny bit of progress.
That's the spirit. Consistency over intensity. That's the key takeaway here.
So where do we even begin with this whole tiny changes thing? Where is the starting point?
One of the most fascinating ideas in Atomic Habits is the concept of identity-based habits.
Okay, now you're going to have to unpack that one for me. What does that even mean?
Sure, it's the idea that instead of focusing on what we want to achieve, we should focus on who we want to become.
So less about, I don't know, let's say losing 10 pounds, and more about becoming a healthy person.
You got it. It's about aligning your actions with your desired identity.
That's a pretty profound shift in thinking, isn't it?
It really is. It's almost like an actor getting into character. The more you embody the identity of the person you want to be, the more naturally the actions will follow.
So instead of saying, I want to write a book, I should be saying, I am a writer.
Exactly. It's about shifting your self-perception and letting your actions flow from that new identity.
Okay, I can see how that would be incredibly powerful. But how do we actually make those habits stick? I mean, it's one thing to say I'm a runner, but it's another thing to actually lace up those shoes and hit the pavement.
That's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in. They're like these super practical strategies for making desired behaviors easier to adopt and those pesky undesired ones harder to repeat.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me law number 1. Hit me with it.
The first law is make it obvious. It's all about making the cues that trigger your habits as clear and prominent as possible.
So kind of like setting yourself up for success by making the desired action the most obvious choice.
Exactly. The less friction, the better. Like, want to drink more water? Keep a full water bottle on your desk where you can't miss it.
Okay, that's a simple one, but I can see how it would make a difference. So what's the next law?
Law number 2 is make it attractive. This is all about attaching pleasure to the habit you want to build, making it something you genuinely look forward to rather than dread.
So if I'm trying to, say, get myself to exercise more regularly, maybe I should pair it with something I really enjoy, like listening to a podcast. Hint, hint.
Exactly. You're linking the habit to something pleasurable, making it more appealing to your brain.
I like it. All right, what's the next one?
Law number 3 is make it easy. And this one's all about starting small, not overwhelming yourself with these huge, unrealistic expectations.
So instead of aiming to, I don't know, read 50 pages a day, I should maybe start with just 1 page. Or like instead of a whole hour of meditation, just 5 minutes.
Precisely. The key is to lower the barrier to entry, make that initial step so ridiculously easy that you can't say no.
Okay, I'm feeling less overwhelmed already. What's the final law?
The 4th law is make it satisfying. This one's all about rewarding yourself for completing the desired action, reinforcing that behavior, and making it more likely that you'll repeat it.
Right, it's like giving your brain that little dopamine hit so it knows, hey, we should do that again.
Exactly. Celebrate your wins, track your progress, or just savor that feeling of accomplishment after completing the habit. It's all about reinforcing that positive feedback loop.
This framework is so brilliant in its simplicity.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm curious, can we use these same laws to break bad habits?
Absolutely. You just reverse the process. So to break the habit of, say, endlessly scrolling on social media, you could make it invisible by deleting those apps from your phone or logging out of your accounts.
So I'm making it harder to access, removing the temptation.
Right. And then to make it unattractive, you could remind yourself of how drained and unproductive you feel after spending too much time online.
Okay, that's a really powerful example. It's like you're taking away all the cues and rewards that were fueling that bad habit.
You got it. Be strategic and intentional about designing your environment and habits.
This is already making me rethink my approach to so many things. But before we go too far, I remember they touched on this concept of habit stacking in the podcast, and I got to admit, I wasn't totally sure what they meant. Can we dig into that a bit?
Of course, habit stacking is all about linking a new habit to an existing one. It's like you've already got this habit ingrained, you do it without even thinking, so why not piggyback on that?
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So, like if I wanted to, say, start flossing regularly, I could make it a habit to floss right after I brush my teeth.
Perfect example. You're already brushing your teeth every day, it's automatic. So adding flossing right after makes it so much easier to remember and follow through.
Ah, that makes a ton of sense. It's like you're leveraging that existing neural pathway, so the new habit feels less daunting and more automatic.
Precisely. You're working smarter, not harder. And this can be applied to any habit, big or small.
This is already making me rethink my whole approach to forming new habits. But wow, we've covered a lot of ground already. Maybe we should take a little break and come back to this for part two.
Sounds good to me. There's still so much more to explore in the world of atomic habits.
All right, we'll be right back with more insights and strategies from Atomic Habits. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to uncover more of these habit-forming secrets from Atomic Habits?
Absolutely. I'm excited to dig deeper.
Me too. You know, that whole idea of the 1% rule really stuck with me. It's just like so encouraging to think that even small efforts, when you do them consistently, can make such a big difference.
It's powerful, right? You don't have to wait for some big surge of motivation to start taking action, even if it's a tiny step.
Yeah, like that example you gave about increasing your writing speed by just 1% each day, leading to almost like 4 times faster writing in a year.
Exactly. It really highlights the point. It's not about pushing yourself to the max every single day. It's more about, showing up consistently.
It feels so much more doable that way, you know? More sustainable than those go big or go home approaches, which, let's be real, usually end up with us, like going home and giving up.
Totally. It's about those sustainable habits, the kind that become second nature, that you just do without even thinking.
So speaking of habits, there was this other concept from the podcast discussion that I found super interesting. The 2-minute rule.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, okay, what is this all about?
Oh, yeah. The 2-minute rule. It's all about making things as easy as possible for yourself.
So could you give us like a quick recap? How does it work?
Basically, it's saying if something takes less than 2 minutes to do, just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just take action.
Okay, so like if I was trying to, finally start that running routine I've been talking about forever, the 2-minute rule would suggest that I should focus on just putting on my running shoes, not on, like running a whole 5 miles.
Exactly. You're breaking down that initial step, that first hurdle, into something so easy you can't possibly say no. And often, that tiny action is enough to get you going.
So it's almost like a mental trick, right? A way to kind of outsmart that resistance we all have.
You could say that. It's about removing those mental barriers. And once you've taken that first step, it's much easier to keep going.
That makes so much sense. But how does this 2-minute rule fit into that whole framework of habit formation we were talking about earlier?
Well, remember those 4 laws of behavior change. The 2-minute rule fits right into that third law. Make it easy.
Ah, right. So by like breaking that initial action down into something that takes less than 2 minutes, you're essentially removing that friction, making it easier to get started.
Exactly. You're lowering the barrier to entry, increasing the chances that you'll actually follow through.
Okay, so all these pieces are starting to fit together. It's about those small wins, those tiny changes, building on each other. And this all kind of leads into another idea we touched on, environment design.
Oh, absolutely. Environment design is so important because it recognizes that willpower is a finite resource. We only have so much of it. And often, we underestimate how much our surroundings influence us.
It's almost like we're products of our environment, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. We're constantly bombarded with cues and triggers from our environment. So if you really want to make lasting changes, you've got to create an environment that supports those changes.
The podcast gave some great examples, like, keeping a book by your bed if you want to read more, or like getting rid of all the junk food in your pantry if you're trying to eat healthier.
Exactly. It's about making those desired behaviors as easy and convenient as possible.
This concept is resonating with me. It's
Yeah.
making me realize, like, just how much my surroundings really do shape my choices.
It's powerful stuff, and it's crucial to remember when you're trying to build lasting habits.
And it ties into this whole idea of, like, systems over goals,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. It's not just about setting a goal. It's about building those systems, those routines, those habits that will actually support you in achieving that goal.
I love that phrase, systems over goals,
Mm.
because it's those systems, those habits that we establish that really determine our long-term success.
You nailed it. It's not about one burst of motivation or a one-time effort. It's about creating a framework, a structure that supports you day in and day out.
This is so insightful. I'm already feeling like more equipped to tackle those big, scary goals by breaking them down and focusing on the systems that'll get me there.
That's the power of understanding how habits work. You're not just relying on willpower anymore. You're working with your brain, not against it.
I feel like we've gone deep on this one. Maybe we should pause here and come back for one final round.
Sounds like a plan. There are a few more nuggets of wisdom from Atomic Habits that I think our listeners would really benefit from.
All right, we'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive into atomic habits. Stay tuned.
And we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into Atomic Habits. Can you believe we're already here?
Time flies when you're breaking down habits,
Yeah,
right?
right.
You know, thinking back on everything we've talked about, it's amazing how much ground we've covered. It's not
Yeah.
just about forming good habits. It's like a whole new approach to personal growth, you know?
I know what you mean. It's a shift in perspective. Instead of those huge, dramatic changes, it's all about small improvements over time.
And you know what? It's so much less intimidating that way. Like
Yeah.
anyone can make a 1% improvement.
Exactly. It's about removing those mental roadblocks and focusing on what we can do right now, in this moment.
And that's what I love about Atomic Habits. It's not just a bunch of theory. It's full of really practical strategies that anyone can use.
Totally. It gives you a framework, like a set of tools to actually understand and change your habits.
Speaking of practical strategies, can we loop back to habit stacking for a second? I just think it's such a genius idea.
Me too. It's so simple, but it really works.
Remind us again how it works.
So, you take an existing habit, something you already do consistently without even thinking about it, and then you stack a new habit on top of it.
Like we were talking about flossing after brushing your teeth.
Exactly. You're already brushing your teeth, so why not just add flossing into that routine? Makes it way easier to remember and do.
Your brain's already in that habit mode, so it just flows naturally.
Totally. And the best part is you can use it for any habit. Big or small, it doesn't matter.
So for our listeners out there, if you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, habit stacking might be a great place to start.
Couldn't agree more. It's a game changer.
Okay, and I know we touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Environment design is key.
Oh, yeah. It's huge. Even with all the best strategies and intentions, if your environment's working against you, it's going to be tough.
Like they said in the podcast, if you're trying to cut back on sugar, don't just rely on willpower, get that junk food out of your house.
Right. Don't even give yourself the chance to be tempted.
And on the flip side, make those good choices easy. Have healthy snacks front and center.
Exactly. Make it easy to do the right thing and much harder to do the wrong thing.
We're setting ourselves up for success.
Yeah.
Right. By making those desired behaviors the easiest option.
You got it.
And, you know, this all goes back to that idea of systems over goals.
Ah, yes. One of my favorite concepts.
It's not enough to just have a goal. You need the systems in place, the routines, the habits that'll actually get you there.
I love that. It's so true. It's those systems, those habits that determine our long-term success.
Like they say, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
Powerful stuff.
And even when we mess up, you know, because we all do, it's those systems that help us get back on track. Remember, never miss twice.
Right. Perfection isn't the goal. It's about consistency.
And that loops back to those identity-based habits, doesn't it? If you see yourself as someone who, let's say, never misses a workout, then one slip-up won't completely derail you.
Exactly. You're more likely to bounce back quickly because it's aligned with who you believe you are.
It's about resilience, that commitment to showing up, even when it's tough.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been amazing. Such an insightful exploration of atomic habits.
I agree.
I feel like I have a whole new set of tools for approaching personal growth.
And hopefully our listeners do too. It's all about those small changes that add up to big results.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. What's one small habit you can start today that could have a huge impact on your life a year from now?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the power of those tiny actions, right?
Right. They might seem insignificant at first, but when you do them consistently, they can really transform your life.
So true.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into atomic habits. Go forth and build those atomic habits.
We'll be here cheering you on. See you next time.